Hi everyone, welcome to Money and Me podcast by the Coin Republic. I am Varuni Trivedi, your host and the editor in chief at the Coin Republic. And like always, we have a super interesting guest today with us on Money and Me. We have with us Scot Johnson. He's the founder and CEO of Digital Shovel. Thank you so much for joining us this pleasant day, Scott. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks very much for having me on the.
Thank you so much for joining us. Scott is the founder and CEO, and as well the lead designer of Digital Shovel. It's a company specializing in developing innovative ventilation, electrical distribution equipment, and modular data centers, specifically tailored for cryptocurrency mining industry. So we'll talk a lot about that, as well as Scott, your journey in this space. But before that, if you can briefly introduce yourself and, of course, Digital Shovel to our viewers, that would be great.
Certainly, again, thank you. Like you mentioned earlier, my name's Scot Johnson. I'm the founder of Digital Shovel. I started crypto mining with Ethereum back in, Zcash and Ethereum back in 2015, 2016. Went down the rabbit hole of converting a room in my condo into a mining farm and then doing an industrial unit with a colleague of mine, and then eventually a shipping container that we converted. And one thing kind of led to another. And in 2018, people started asking us to build containers for them. And we found a Digital Shovel. Digital Shovel now is a fully vertically integrated manufacturer of mining infrastructure, everything except for the actual servers themselves. We build pretty much in-house. So all the sheet metal work, PCB assembly, the software for controlling our modular data centers, the enclosure, and everything right up to the point where you're going to plug the miner in is what we build.
So, from your days when you used to mine ETH and Zcash, what was the narrative like? What triggered you to found Digital Shovel? And if you could just take us through that journey of you as a miner to now that you're helping a lot others do that, how did it look like?
So it's kind of a funny story. I naively thought that cryptocurrency mining was hacking into somebody else's wallet. I didn't know anything about crypto. And I thought the whole thing was a scam. And I was at an entrepreneur's dinner for another startup I had, and somebody brought this up and alluded to just how wrong I was. I think they used some more um, creative words than that. But they very much educated me that evening. I went home. I bought, I think it was an R280 graphics card or something like that, and started mining Zcash at 2 souls per second, which is if you've ever mined Zcash, it's a relatively minuscule amount. But I mined my first couple coins, and by the start of, I guess it was 2017. Yeah, it would have been 2017. I think we were around like $30 for ETH at the time, and in February it jumped up to 135, and then in June it was around 400, and it started to become pretty lucrative, and stopped everything else I was doing and went down the rabbit hole. And I'd say by 2018 really got into the Bitcoin mining side. But when I started in 2015, 2016, um, it was very much nowhere near as adopted as it is today, and everybody thought I was absolutely crazy. I mean, some still do, but not as many.
We're glad people still, but I do have to say that people in crypto have to be a little bit crazy to be in this rabbit hole. Of course, you've been in this space for such a long time, and you've had your own significant journey from a miner to now providing requirements for other cryptocurrency miners. How has the space at large evolved in the past few years, and how have you guys at Digital Shovel adapted to the changing needs of this space? Are there any specific requirements or needs that have significantly changed in this space?
I'd say it certainly has become far more industrialized and a lot more respected as a actual industry. I mean, before, the people in the regular stock market kind of laughed at the thought of Bitcoin miners, and it was something that was a bubble that was going to disappear. I think that narrative has very much disappeared, and it is here to stay. It's something that people have great confidence in. That's not to say that it is an investment for the risk adverse. It's certainly still going to be very volatile, but the industry is a lot more mature. There's insurance products that are available. There's hedging products that are available. Um, you can go and buy Bitcoin, directly through an ETF on a major market, and there's a lot more transparency in terms of how the industry works. So it's not this, black box. I put money in and hopefully I get Bitcoin out. There's a lot more metrics and analysts and stuff that you can more safely in an educated way invest in Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining.
Absolutely. If we talk about Bitcoin mining, however, of course, there was a craze around Bitcoin mining in back in those days. Even if we look at just half a decade back from now, Bitcoin mining used to be something else. It would be a lot more profitable, especially for retailers. Now, however, we see you correctly mentioned that the industry has evolved. It's a lot more industrial now. It's more enterprise now. But how have retailers sort of taken a backseat when it comes to mining? Also, there are a lot of mining related products that people can invest in. How good are they? Are they even sustainable? And what sort of an investment product side, if we look at the investment product side, what sort of an influx of money are we sort of anticipating in the market?
I'll answer first on the retail investor side of it in terms of mining. You're right. I mean, the days of being able to grab a bunch of equipment on the cheap from when I started, and being able to, I could have, was making a healthy income and would have had to not work whatsoever during those days. And had I held all those coins, it would have been a great investment to this day. I held a good chunk, but at times, sometimes you got to pay the bills. The days of being able to go and do that as a home miner are a lot more challenging. That's not saying to say that you can't do that, but you very much need to buy your equipment like you buy your Bitcoin. You need to be buying it in a smart way. You don't need to say, okay, well, the market's really frothy right now and excited, and this is the time to go buy equipment. That's generally the worst time. I mean, there was, we're going to go back, when we were down in the 20s and the 30s. Everybody's like, oh, is that, are you still doing that? Are you still in that Bitcoin mining business? When on the other hand, I'm telling people this is the time to get in. You can buy equipment for next to nothing. And so long as you have a reasonable power price, you can make some really good money. Coming in when the market's in the high 60s, approaching the 70s, it's going to be really challenging to get equipment and have a competitive advantage. That said, when you look at the industrial scale miners, they're buying power on average in the 4 cent US dollar per kilowatt hour range. And even with more expensive equipment, they're going to be paying a lot better price than the retail investors, because they're going to be buying tens of thousands of miners at a time. So they're going to get a discount on the equipment. Plus, they have a low power cost, which means they're going to be able to ride that equipment out for a much longer period, which unfortunately the retail investor does not have the ability to do. On the investment product side, to be honest, when I got into the industry, I decided I was going to do one of two things. I was either going to mine or I was going to try to trade and play the market. I don't do any trading whatsoever, so I can't really speak to which one is better than the other. What I can say is it's nice to see pure play Bitcoin purchases available to regular markets. I mean, there's a lot of pension funds and major investment funds that have a mandate that it's got to be on a major market for them to be able to purchase that asset. They can't just go hold Bitcoin on their own. And allowing those massive money markets to now have access to Bitcoin and affect the Bitcoin price is great for stability, and it's great for the market as a whole.
How does your expertise as a miner yourself in the cryptocurrency space and your role as the CEO founder and most importantly lead designer, that was a designation that did catch my interest. What are your roles at Digital Shovel, and how does your expertise as a miner tie in with the larger narrative that Digital Shovel has?
I like to try to keep my hand in as many pots as possible, perhaps too many sometimes. I really enjoy the design side of things. I really enjoy being creative. When I say lead designer, that doesn't mean we don't have an incredibly amazing, talented team that champion products often on their own. I do like to get involved in a high level at least on each one of our design projects. But we have an incredible team, whether it's electronics, software, mechanical engineering, of guys that, we'll have our conceptual spitball session and go over the high level of what we're going to do with our product, and they will go through and work on a much more granular level. In the early days, I can't remember quite how far back. I mean, for at least the first couple of years, it was me, a notepad, and the guys in the back doing the fabrication, and that was it. We didn't have any AutoCAD or SolidWorks models or FEMA analysis like we do now. But I still like to stay intimately involved in that side, because I really do enjoy the creative side of it. And then I'm also face to face with a lot of our customers, hearing what their challenges are, hearing how we can make the product better, which is one of the advantages we have to being so vertically integrated. We can have a call about a new issue. For instance, Bitmain just released their new S21 Pro and started shipping it, and lo and behold, the size is different than all the previous miners. We're now going to have to go retrofit our shelves, our back plates, and things like that, and that's something that we can do on the fly, which other manufacturers that rely on outside contractors to do their manufacturing don't have the ability to do, and that's what I really like about working at this company.
Modular data centers is something that you guys at Digital Shovel specialize in. What do they exactly mean? And if you could talk about how does Digital Shovel differentiate itself from other such competitors in this space?
So what we mean by modular data centers, again, I started earlier just cutting apart 40-foot shipping containers, modifying those, and that was our fixed structure. So we had one size, that was it. That was your only option. There was some inner guts that we could change, for lack of a better word. However, that was our focus out the gate. We've now moved to these modular blocks, which instead of requiring a giant a giant crane and a tractor trailer with a wide load to be able to handle them, they're individual blocks that fit actually into a shipping container. So we can actually ship them overseas, and then in the field, they go together in modular building blocks, up to 66 feet long and 2 stories high, and allows our clients to expand or contract their data center size on a modular nature based on the power availability that they have, or the transformers they have, or a variety of other factors. Rather than having a one size fits all solution, we can really conform to what our clients' needs are.
If we talk about certain emerging trends in this space, of course, modular data centers is something that came up as trends evolved in the mining space. If you have to talk about any emerging trends that could take over the crypto mining space at large, what would they be? And are you anticipating any trends to sort of take over by the end of this year or next year beginning, probably?
Um, Heat recycle is a big one right now. Reusing heat in both just to benefit from the heat, and then a variety of European nations have required, in order to be tied to the grid, you've got to be recycling the heat in some way or form, whether it be going into a greenhouse, whether you capture that in a water product and then use that to heat a home or something to that effect. One of our smaller products, it's called our nanopod, which is actually designed for retail investors. It allows up to just 28 miners, is designed to do just that. So it has 6 fans, and you can actually route the fans, one to a greenhouse, one to a garage, one to your basement, and you can program the fans to route the heat depending on how much heat you need in certain areas, and then ventilate the rest outside. I'd say that's one of the major trends, is heat recycling. Another is power curtailment, and getting paid by the grid to curtail. A lot of people, there's this really false narrative that all Bitcoin mining is bad for the grid and we're using all this power and blah, 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 blah. When in reality, a lot of grids are offering incentives for Bitcoin miners to come, because you've got this power curve in terms of price. And the top of the curve is when prices are at their absolute peak, and that's when everybody has their AC on or have all the heaters on, and there's a huge load on the grid. The rest of the time, the grid has this idle capacity that needs to be used up, and they're not generating any revenue from it. Traditionally, if you have a big energy consumer like aluminum smelting plant or some big factory, they can't just turn off. So when they create a 100 megawatt load, they're using it 100% of the time. And when they reach the peak, they need to stay on because it takes 2 days for them to shut down the plant. Bitcoin miners are the opposite. We can curtail
Mhm.
within 5 minutes. We can turn off our load, and what we do is we're using the other side of that bell curve,
Yeah.
consuming the power, generating revenue for the distribution company, for the energy producers, and then when they reach that peak, they send a signal or they call, depending on the utility you're in, and the Bitcoin miner will turn off. Not only does the Bitcoin miner save money doing that, the grid will actually pay them money because it's cheaper than going and building another natural gas power plant that they got to turn on really quick when that consumption goes. So it's actually creating a benefit to the grid rather than being a burden, like a lot of the narrative you hear in the news and various outlets.
Right. The narrative has sort of shifted, but we won't say that the narrative has completely moved on to the positive or the optimistic side, especially if we look at sustainability and energy efficiency. And you already mentioned recycling as one of the bigger trends that the industry can see at large. But what were some of the steps that the space at large took to address these concerns? And of course, a lot of it was, as we spoke about, FAF or was more of demeaning this space at large. But how did companies like Digital Shovel or yourself at the helm of this company address these issues? Did you try to bring any changes to the narrative or address them in terms of data or facts?
Um, I'll answer that in two ways. One, first, in terms of ways we've tried to address it. Our entire solution that we build is a smart solution, meaning that even if you don't have the ability to control your miner's power, you can actually control it from the outlets, kind of like smart switches in your house. And we can turn that stuff on and off on the fly remotely, which allows you to do that power management we talked about. Speaking on the renewable side of things, what I referred to earlier rings true even more with renewables, especially wind and solar, because with wind, a lot of the time, it's blowing really hard at night and you just don't need that power. And in fact, they sometimes need to put the power into the grid, and the rates, for instance, in Texas, actually run negative, meaning that the energy producer actually has to pay the grid to take the power, which means it's going to take longer for that wind turbine to generate a revenue and create an ROI, which means there's less investment in wind and other renewable. If you can take and create a Bitcoin load that guarantees they're going to generate revenue no matter what, and when the price goes really high, the Bitcoin miner will turn off, send that power to the grid, but they'll guarantee that they're going to be generating revenue 100% of the time, no matter what. If they're producing energy, it's never going to be negative. They're always going to be making X. That makes those projects a lot more feasible, brings more investment to renewable products, more investment to renewable energy and generation, which is better for the industry as a whole.
Makes sense. You talk about a lot of things becoming smart. And if you talk about AI, is there any sort of integration that mining has found with AI? Are things getting automated? What is the future looking like? And are you integrating? My primary question, I think, would be that is there any way in which AI or automation is getting integrated with the mining sector at large?
There's in two ways. One, there's AI being used to do predictive power models and stuff like that in energy trading. We use some relatively low level AI that's available to manage the data center, power cycle miners when there's a problem, and create different automations. Um, on the other hand, there's a lot of overlap happening right now in the Bitcoin mining space, with really large miners starting to get into the AI play. So they're not just hosting Bitcoin miners, they're also starting to host AI farms. And we're seeing a really big pivot, not away from Bitcoin mining, but definitely you're seeing, I think the majority of the large publicly traded miners in the space, at least in the US, all have an AI plan on the way right now. And it's something we're looking to pivot into as well. We don't have a product there yet, but it's very exciting to see what's going to happen.
Interesting. If we talk about certain geographies that are more integrated with the concept of cryptocurrency mining, what would they be? And I'm sure that a lot of factors, including the cost of electricity, etc., play into the narrative. But what are some of the geographies or demographies that are leading the way in terms of cryptocurrency mining still?
I'd say, from a large public miner side, I mean, a lot of them are in the US, just because the lack of geopolitical risk and stability there. On the flip side, though, you do have various states had introduced litigation or legislation rather that have banned or create a moratorium to prevent mining. Um, Alberta has a reasonably large foothold there, especially on the stranded gas play, where they're using excess natural gas to create their own power to do mining. Um, there are pockets in certain areas throughout Europe, nothing with quite a large projects that you'll see in North America. As well in South America, there's a variety of pockets where you've got cheap stranded power, and it's at a really low price, but you have some geopolitical risk in dealing with those markets. That's not to say that there aren't some really large products there, but the majority of our clients, 99% of them, are in the US.
Mhm. What sort of geopolitical risks are we looking at here? And of course, regulatory scrutiny, I'm sure, has a lot to play with it. There are still quite a few areas in which there is increasing regulatory scrutiny around cryptocurrency mining, regarding maybe energy consumption. And how does one deal with it? Are we addressing that as a sector at large? And how does that play, the regulation and compliance part play into the larger narrative for cryptocurrency mining?
A lot of it as a result of lack of education of some of the things
Hmm.
that I mentioned earlier, and understanding the ways that Bitcoin mining can actually help the grid rather than being a burden or a dog on it. But that's usually what you'll see. You'll see politicians come in that, Bitcoin mining's bad, and they want to wave that banner, and they're going to ban it. And there are definitely groups. One that we support very heavily, the Satoshi Action Fund. Dennis
Yeah.
Porter and his entire team are doing some really great work. We were just at a fundraiser for them down in Miami at the Mining Disrupt conference, and they've been doing a lot of really good work trying to push through legislation, the Right to Mine Act, and a variety of other things to help benefit the industry. And the best thing we can do is educate people, answer questions, try to make it not as much of a black box of secrecy, open up and explain how this thing can help benefit the industry, can help benefit the renewable side, and in effect lower energy prices for everybody. Because if we're using all that idle capacity, the overall energy price is going to come down because we're generating more revenue in an area where they would not have generated revenue previously, which will take the price off the peaks.
Mhm. Makes sense. For retailers, Scott, and this is a question that has persisted for about a couple of years now. For retailers, how profitable is mining? Is it still profitable? How can they achieve it? And also, are there what other cryptocurrencies, other than, of course, your Bitcoin, can one take a look at for mining?
I'm pretty much at this point a pretty Bitcoin purist. I am seeing a lot of people play around with Caspa miners.
Yeah.
I think we even saw Marathon mine like 10 or 15 million bucks worth of Caspa recently, and they're obviously one of the biggest miners out there. Um, we're pretty much more of a pure play Bitcoin is the way that I look at things. That's not to say you can't go with the alts. I mean,
Hmm.
mining an altcoin is a lot like buying an altcoin. You're either going to get really lucky or you're going to get really not. And do your research and see if it makes sense for you. But again, same thing holds true to what I alluded to earlier in terms of when you're buying your equipment. You want to be buying that equipment not when everybody's hyping into it, because at that point ship's already sailed. You wanted to do the research, you wanted to find that underdog early on and get in at a time when not everybody else is wanting to buy. And unfortunately, that's usually when most of the eyes are not on Bitcoin and when most of the eyes are not on the altcoins, and everybody's saying, okay, well, I've lost my money, I don't want to do this again. Those are usually the times that you really want to get into that space and start mining. You can go and buy most newer generation equipment. I mean, depending on your power price, if you buy even an S19J Pro, um, you could still generate revenue right now. I mean, I probably wouldn't recommend that for a home miner. The newer miners, it really depends on your energy price. I mean, you can have an at-home price. If you're in Newfoundland here in Canada, you can buy pretty much any miner. Maybe not any miner, but the majority of the miners. But your price is so low, you're going to make a great ROI. If you are where I am here in Toronto, Canada, I think we pay 12 cents per kilowatt hour.
Right.
you've got to get a relatively new piece of equipment to be generating profit and potentially see the ROI in that piece of equipment. So you've got to do your research. You can't just dive into it blindly. There's a lot of calculators that are out there that'll help you work out those numbers. But my advice be whatever number you see on the calculator, cut it in half, because that's probably what you're going to be generating by the time you get set up and rolling.
Makes sense. Scott, how are you imagining the sector to sort of evolve in the next decade and a half? What are your expectations from the sector at large?
Decade and a half, that's a long time.
Yeah.
We haven't even been mining for that long. Well, I guess we're approaching that, but decade and a half. Um,
Uh,
I really think it's going to be a lot more industrialized.
right.
Again, as a Bitcoin maximalist, I think you're going to see a lot more major companies and perhaps even nation states holding Bitcoin reserves and realizing a better and more stable way to build those reserves is to build their own mines and use that as an energy hedging product for managing their power grid. They're going to realize that this is a tool that is not just like, why go and pay an incentive to the Bitcoin miner when they can go and do it on an industrial level themselves? I mean, there's going to be a bit of both. I think it's not going to be just moved up to that level and everybody else is going to be cut out of the party. But I think you're going to see certain nation states, I don't know how large,
Right.
but certain nation states definitely building large Bitcoin Bitcoin mines to help manage and stabilize their power grid and stabilize their power price.
Mm. Lastly, what are your plans for the future of Digital Shovel? Are there any interesting updates, upgrades, or bomb drops that you guys are going to be doing this year with the 2 quarters that are left?
Yeah, so we're in the process of a full redesign right now of our main product line, which is going to be called our Gen 3. We haven't announced it yet, but that will be coming out most likely in Q4, and we're going to have some sort of an event to promote that. We have been working on a new super high efficiency power supply, which also we're planning to release in Q4. Those are our two most exciting projects we got on the go. And just as different challenges come up for the industry, working to find a solution to make mining a lot easier for our customers.
Right. And my last and final question, Scott, to you would be in your long and expansive journey, you've transitioned from being an outsider in this space to now a CEO, founder yourself of a Web3 firm. What are your top three tips, top 3 or 5 tips that you have for entrepreneurs that are just starting out in this space? Anything that, sort of keeps them in the rabbit hole for a lot longer?
Um, it won't be easy, and there's going to be some very dark days. Um, at times, you're going to have to pick one or the other, and it's going to be either keeping the business or selling some of your coins, which I've gone through a couple times, which kind of sucked, but it's paid off in the end. And make sure that it's something that's making you happy.
That was a really great advice, all of those, in fact. And thank you so much, Scott, for joining us on the Money and Me podcast by the Coin Republic. It was my pleasure to host you today, and we look forward to all the amazing things that you would be doing at Digital Shovel. Once again, thank you so much.
The pleasure's all mine, Varuni. Have a great day.